In the middle of a freezing Idaho forest, a loyal German shepherd suddenly stops, stares into the fog, and runs towards something only he can sense. Moments later, his owner, an ex-Marine carrying the weight of battles he never talks about, pushes through the storm and finds a crashed rescue helicopter lying silent between the rocks. No voices, no movement, no signal. But then, faint footprints, drops of blood, and the undeniable sign that someone out there is still alive. As the storm closes in, he has to make a choice: walk away or follow a trail that leads deeper into danger. What he discovers will test his courage, his faith, and remind us all that miracles often begin with a single step into the unknown. If this story touches your heart, please consider subscribing to join our family of inspiring stories. And thank you, truly, for being here with us. The early autumn sun barely touched the rugged peaks surrounding Sawtooth Wilderness in Idaho. The air was thin and cold enough to sting the lungs, carrying with it the distant scent of pine resin and damp earth. Fog draped itself across the forest floor like a heavy blanket, swallowing sound and color as if the world had not fully chosen to wake up. The landscape was quiet in the way only remote American wilderness could be: vast, unforgiving, and brutally honest. Jack Turner, a 38-year-old former Marine with a weathered face carved by years of discipline and combat, walked steadily along a narrow trail that cut through the timberland. His dark brown hair, brushed back but still unruly from the morning wind, framed a strong brow and eyes sharpened by repetition and responsibility. His beard was trimmed close to the skin, not out of vanity but habit, a trace of the Marine discipline he never fully let go. Even in moments of peace, Jack moved like a man who expected the unexpected. Beside him trotted Rex, his 5-year-old German shepherd with a thick black and tan coat and sharp amber eyes that missed nothing. Rex was large for his breed, muscles rippling beneath his fur, but what stood out most was his alertness. Ears always perked, nose testing every shift in the wind. Jack had rescued him as a pup after returning from deployment, and the dog had become his anchor. Rex was fearless, loyal beyond logic, and unusually intuitive, almost as if he sensed Jack's unspoken thoughts. Their weekly patrols through the forest had become a routine, a way for Jack to quiet the ghosts of his military past and channel his restless energy into something grounding. But today, the stillness felt different, an unease prickling beneath the calm surface. Rex stopped. His body stiffened, tail raised, nostrils flaring sharply. Jack slowed, instantly alert. "What is it, buddy?" he murmured in a low voice that carried more instinct than concern. Rex lowered his head and pulled forward with deliberate urgency, his paws crunching the frost-bitten leaves. Jack followed, tension rising in his chest. The dog rarely reacted without reason. As they moved deeper off the trail, the smell reached Jack too. Faint but unmistakable. Burnt metal mixed with something darker, something coppery. Smoke. Fuel. Blood. He picked up his pace, boots scraping over loose gravel. The fog grew denser as they moved toward a rocky slope, jagged stones protruding like broken teeth. Rex bounded ahead, barking once, sharp, alert, not panicked, but insistent. And then Jack saw it. A flash of orange through the mist. A helicopter. A rescue helicopter, or what was left of it, wedged violently between two slanted rock faces. The tail boom was snapped clean off, lying 30 yards away in a mess of twisted metal and shattered glass. The rotors were bent and warped, one blade buried halfway into the dirt. The crash site was silent, chillingly so. No movement, no voices, no emergency beacons. Just the ticking of cooling metal and the breeze brushing through torn fabric. Jack's jaw tightened. A crash this fresh should have been swarming with responders, unless the signal never made it out. He approached slowly, scanning for threats out of instinct more than fear. Rex stayed close, sniffing the dirt near the broken fuselage. Jack crouched near a scorched panel, touching it briefly. It was still warm. Whatever happened, it hadn't been long. He circled the helicopter and found what he feared. Blood. Not a pool, but a trail. Drops smeared across rocks, footprints leading away, staggered, uneven, the steps of someone injured but determined. Jack examined the prints carefully. One set. Maybe two. Recent. Inside the helicopter's open side door, hanging crookedly by a single hinge, the cockpit was a mess of shattered instruments. A backpack lay slumped against a seat, its straps torn. A crushed headset lay trapped beneath a fallen panel. Then Jack noticed the radio panel. Dead. Burnt wires, blown circuitry. No wonder there was no distress call. He looked up at the sky. Heavy clouds pushed quickly across the ridge, swallowing the blue behind them. A storm front. Fast. Cold. Dangerous. Jack exhaled slowly, his breath fogging in the air. Someone survived, he muttered. The realization hit with the weight of responsibility he thought he'd escaped when he left the Marines. But some instincts never left a man. The instinct to protect, to find the living before they became the lost. He rested his hand briefly on Rex's back. They're out there. Find them, boy. Rex sniffed the blood pattern with renewed intensity, then stepped confidently toward the trees, tail rigid with focus. Jack followed, senses sharpening with every step. They descended a narrow slope, branches brushing their shoulders as the light dimmed under the thickening cloud cover. The temperature dropped, crisp and biting. The trail of blood grew more erratic. Whoever it belonged to was weakening. Rex paused again, lowering his nose to a faint indentation in the dirt. A handprint. Small. Likely a woman's. Jack's heartbeat quickened. The forest around them seemed to constrict, the air thick with urgency. If someone injured was still moving, they were running out of time. Nightfall would bring freezing temperatures. The storm would bring worse. Jack tightened the straps of his pack and moved faster. He didn't know who he was searching for yet, but he knew the wilderness well enough to understand one thing without doubt. If he didn't reach them before darkness fell, they wouldn't make it. With Rex leading the way and the fading trail guiding his instincts, Jack Turner stepped deeper into the fog-choked forest, determined to bring back whoever still clung to life. Rex pushed ahead with determined precision, nose tracing the thin ribbon of blood that cut through the forest floor. The fog thinned as Jack followed him toward a narrow rock formation where the wind funneled sharply between the stone walls. The temperature had dropped noticeably, the cold settling into Jack's bones as the first hints of the incoming storm churned above the treetops. Rex suddenly stopped, ears stiff, tail lowered, letting out a low, urgent whine. Jack quickened his pace and stepped around a jutting boulder. And there she was. A woman lay half-propped against the rock, her breath shallow, her lips trembling violently from the cold. She looked to be around 29, with a lean, athletic build, characteristic of someone accustomed to long hours in the air. Her skin was pale and taut from the frigid temperature, and strands of golden-brown hair clung damply to her cheeks. Her face, though smeared with dirt and dried blood, held strong, defined features, a straight nose, high cheekbones, and eyes that flickered open with equal parts exhaustion and stubbornness. Her flight suit, orange and reflective, was torn at one thigh where a deep gash bled slowly through the fabric. Jack crouched beside her. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" She swallowed, her voice a rasp. "I thought I heard someone. You're not... rescue?" "No, just passing through," Jack said, checking her pulse, relieved to find it faint but steady. "Name?" Sarah Miller." She bit back a shiver. "Pilot." Her words came in fragments, her breath fogging weakly in front of her. Jack immediately assessed her condition. Hypothermia setting in, blood loss significant, mobility severely compromised. She needed warmth and shelter within the hour or her body would shut down completely. Rex pressed his head gently against her arm, sensing her distress. Sarah managed the faintest smile at the dog. "He's beautiful." "He's smart too," Jack said quietly. "Smart enough to find you." Sarah exhaled shakily, closing her eyes for a moment before forcing herself to speak again. "There were 2 of us in the back. I had one passenger, a boy, 12, Dylan." Her voice cracked with worry. "He was buckled in when we went down. I tried to reach him, but..." Her eyes glistened. "He wasn't there when I woke up." Jack's jaw tightened. A child out here injured, alone, with a storm rolling in. It was a dire combination, but he kept his voice steady. "You did what you could. Right now we need to get you stable." Sarah shook her head weakly. "Find him first. Please." Jack glanced toward the darkening sky. Thunder rumbled in the distance, low but approaching. He knew the storm would be brutal, rain turning to sleet, temperatures plummeting, visibility dropping to near zero. Moving Sarah in this condition would be difficult, but leaving her here in the open would be fatal. He slipped off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders, then pulled a thermal blanket from his pack and tucked it tightly around her body. "We're getting you out of here. Dylan can't be far. I'll go after him once you're safe." She drew in a shaky breath, guilt flickering across her features. "I should have been stronger. I should have..." "Stop." Jack's tone was firm but calm. "Crashes happen fast. You're alive, and that matters. The boy has a chance because of that." Sarah's eyes softened, and for a moment her facade of composure cracked, revealing a woman carrying the weight of survivor's guilt. Jack had seen that expression before, in war zones, after blasts, on men who lived when their comrades didn't. He recognized the silent torment. He scanned the area for threats, then slipped one arm behind her shoulders and the other beneath her legs. When he lifted, Sarah tensed, gritting her teeth against the flare of pain in her injured thigh. She tried to muffle a groan, but Jack felt the tremor run through her. "You're okay? I've got you," he said, keeping his movements controlled. Rex circled them protectively, ears turning with every distant crack of thunder. Jack began the slow climb up the rocky incline, careful not to slip on loose gravel. Each step was deliberate, his muscles straining under Sarah's weight, but he pressed on. The wind howled between the stone walls, carrying flecks of cold moisture that stung the skin like needles. Sarah clung weakly to his shirt. "The storm, it hit us out of nowhere. There was a downdraft. I fought it but couldn't pull up. I should have been able to..." Her voice faded again, panic flickering behind her fading strength. "Dylan must be terrified." "We'll find him," Jack said with certainty. "But not if we lose you first." Rex barked once, a sharp warning. Dark clouds had swallowed the last sliver of sunlight, and a cold, metallic smell filled the air. The first sheets of rain began to fall, cold and fast. Jack finally reached a small, natural overhang shaped by years of erosion. It wasn't much, but it offered some protection from the worsening storm. He lowered Sarah carefully, covered her with the blanket again, and draped his jacket over her chest. She looked up at him, her breath unsteady but eyes clearer. "You came out of nowhere," she whispered. "Why help us?" Jack paused, the memories of war flickering through his mind. Faces he couldn't save, promises he couldn't keep. "Because someone needs help," he said simply. "That's enough." Rex nudged Jack's side, urging him back toward the direction of the crash. The trail of blood had faded, but the scent remained. Jack rose, tightening the straps of his pack. He looked down at Sarah. "Stay awake. Keep talking to yourself if you need to. I'll be back with Dylan." Sarah nodded weakly. "Please, hurry." Jack stepped into the storm, Rex surging ahead, the darkness of the forest swallowing them both. Night was coming fast, and a 12-year-old boy was out there, alone. The storm struck with a ferocity Jack had expected, but still found daunting. Sheets of rain hammered against the forest floor, turning dirt to mud and drowning the sound of his footsteps. Wind howled through the trees, bending their branches like they were made of wet straw. After settling Sarah beneath the rocky overhang, ensuring the thermal blanket and his jacket covered her securely, Jack instructed Rex to stay close and keep guard. The dog, though restless, obeyed, curling himself protectively against her side for warmth. Jack gave Sarah one last look, her eyelids fluttering, her breath uneven but present, before stepping back into the violent storm. He moved quickly toward the direction of the helicopter, knowing the boy's trail would branch off somewhere from the crash site. Visibility had dropped drastically, and Jack had to rely more on instinct and memory than anything he could see. The air was thick with the bitter smell of wet pine and diesel fumes lingering from the wreckage. When he reached the crash site again, lightning tore across the sky, illuminating the mangled metal for a split second, like a grim beacon marking where everything had gone wrong. Jack scanned the ground around the helicopter. Rain washed away many of the traces, but he caught signs that couldn't vanish so easily. A set of small drag marks leading away into the dense underbrush. The pattern suggested someone had either crawled or been forced along the ground. Jack crouched and inspected the disturbed leaves. The prints were small, definitely belonging to a child. "Dylan," he murmured under his breath. He pushed deeper into the forest, following the subtle trail. The storm made progress slow, but Jack was patient and thorough, his military training kicking in with every step. He examined snapped branches, displaced rocks, and shallow impressions in the mud. Then he found the first object, a small blue backpack, barely visible beneath a fallen pine bough. He lifted it and brushed off the rain. It was lightweight, with a patch of a cartoon airplane sewn into the front pocket, something a 12-year-old would carry. The sight strengthened his resolve. Another 100 yards in, he found the second clue. A half-soaked map caught against a jagged rock. It was a standard park trail map, edges warped by moisture. Jack tucked it into his jacket to keep it from further damage. The third and most troubling sign came soon after. A scuff mark on the ground that suggested the boy had slipped or fallen while trying to climb over a rocky incline. Jack climbed the slope carefully, gripping the wet stones. At the top, he paused, listening through the storm. Thunder drowned most sound, but something faint tugged at his attention. Not a voice, but a stifled, desperate whimper. He moved toward it immediately. The terrain narrowed into a natural split between two large boulders, like a miniature ravine. Jack shined his flashlight into the crevice, and there, curled into a trembling ball, was Dylan. The boy had sandy blonde hair plastered to his forehead by rain. His face, round and freckled, was streaked with dirt and tears. His skin was pale, almost bluish from the cold, and his clothes, a simple hoodie and jeans, were soaked through. His right arm hung at an unnatural angle, confirming the fracture Sarah feared. Dylan's eyes widened in terror when Jack appeared above him, but beneath the fear was exhaustion so deep he could barely lift his head. "Dylan," Jack said gently, kneeling beside the crevice. "I'm here to help. Your pilot, Sarah, she's alive. She's waiting for you." The boy blinked, confusion mixing with relief. His voice was a strained whisper. She's okay? She's hurt, but she's hanging on. Now let's get you out of here." Jack assessed the tight space. Dylan had likely fallen while trying to climb the rocks and had wedged himself in, too weak and frightened to move. Jack eased himself down carefully, mindful not to cause further collapse. He examined the broken arm, swollen, tender, and definitely fractured. Dylan winced but didn't pull away, too exhausted to resist. "You're a tough kid," Jack said softly. "Just breathe. I'm going to splint this arm so it stops hurting." Using two sturdy sticks and strips of fabric torn from his undershirt, Jack fashioned a makeshift splint and secured Dylan's arm. The boy whimpered at the pressure, but soon relaxed as the pain stabilized. Jack then wrapped his own spare thermal scarf around Dylan's neck and chest to help warm him. When Jack finally lifted him, Dylan clung weakly to his shoulder, his small frame shivering uncontrollably. The storm battered them relentlessly as Jack climbed out of the crevice and began the long trek back. The journey was slow and punishing. Wind punched against Jack with every step, and the weight of Dylan in his arms added strain, but he refused to falter. He kept his breathing steady, focusing on placing one foot in front of the other. After more than 2 exhausting hours, Jack reached the rocky overhang. Rex barked sharply when he saw them and hurried over, sniffing Dylan anxiously. Sarah stirred at the sound, her eyes struggling to open. "Dylan," she whispered hoarsely when she saw the small shape in Jack's arms. Jack knelt beside her, lowering the boy gently. "He's hurt, but alive. I splinted the arm. He needs warmth. We all do." Sarah reached trembling fingers toward Dylan's face, relief washing over her features. Dylan leaned into her touch, eyes finally closing in safety. Jack adjusted the blankets to cover them both, Rex pressing close to share his body heat. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the narrow shelter, there was finally, if only for a moment, hope. The storm did not ease after Jack returned with Dylan. Instead, it intensified with a fury that made every minute feel like a countdown. The wind roared through the trees, bending their trunks until they groaned under the strain. Rain turned the ground into unstable patches of mud, and jagged streaks of lightning carved across the sky. Jack knew their small overhang would not hold much longer. The cold was worsening, seeping into their bones like ice water. Dylan's shivers had become uncontrollable, and Sarah's breathing grew shallow from exhaustion. Staying in that exposed shelter meant risking all their lives. Jack pulled the thermal blankets tighter around Sarah and Dylan. "We can't stay here," he said, voice firm despite the storm's howl. "There's an old ranger station about a mile north. If we move now, we have a chance." Sarah forced her eyes open. Her face was pale beneath smudges of dirt. Her golden brown hair stuck to her forehead from sweat and rain. Her voice was barely audible. A mile. In this? We don't have a choice, Jack replied. Rex stood alert beside them, his black and tan coat soaked, ears twitching constantly. The dog growled toward the darkening slope behind them, a warning. The wind was shifting, bringing with it the grinding sound of loosened rocks. A landslide risk. They had to move. Jack hoisted Dylan onto his back, careful not to jar the boy's fractured arm. Dylan's face pressed weakly against Jack's shoulder, his sandy hair dripping rain. He whispered, I'm not slowing you down, right? Jack tightened his grip reassuringly. You're doing great, kid. Just hold on. Then he helped Sarah to her feet. Her legs trembled beneath her, but she met his gaze with quiet determination. Even injured and freezing, her spirit hadn't broken. I'll try to keep up, she said. You stay between me and Rex, Jack instructed. He'll guide us. They started up the muddy incline as the storm struck harder. Rex led with sharp barks, frequently glancing back to ensure they followed the safest route. Each gust of wind felt like a shove from an unseen force. The forest floor trembled, small stones breaking loose and skittering downslope. Halfway through, a sudden crack echoed overhead. Jack looked up in time to see a large rock loosening from the cliff. Move, he shouted. He lunged forward, pulling Sarah against him as Rex darted to the side. The boulder smashed where she had been standing, sending a spray of smaller stones flying. One clipped Jack's shoulder, but he barely reacted. Adrenaline overrode pain. Sarah looked up at him, shaken. You saved. Keep going, Jack said before she could finish. We're running out of time. They trudged forward as cold rain turned to sleet. The icy pellets stung their faces, coating branches and rocks in a thin, treacherous layer of frost. Dylan whimpered weakly behind Jack, teeth chattering. Jack adjusted his grip and spoke calmly to him. Stay awake for me, Dylan. You hear the wind. That's nature being loud, not dangerous, not while we're together. Despite the chaos, Dylan gave a faint nod. Moments later, the ground beneath Sarah collapsed slightly, her foot sinking into a deep puddle. She gasped in pain as the cold bit into her wounded thigh. Rex let out an urgent bark and nudged her leg, guiding her to a more stable path. Jack supported her weight with one arm while balancing Dylan with the other. His muscles burned, but he pushed harder. The storm demanded a price for every step. Water began to rise around them. Streams overflowed, merging into fast-moving rivulets that threatened to sweep their feet from under them. Jack carefully maneuvered around the rushing water, using fallen branches as makeshift footholds. We're close, he said, breath heavy but steady. Ranger Station should be just beyond those pines. As if nature wished to challenge him, another roar sounded in the distance. A tree, massive and old, snapped under the force of the wind and toppled with ground-shaking impact. They ducked instinctively, and Rex barked frantically, urging Jack to change direction before another tree followed. Finally, through the sheets of sleet, Jack spotted a dark shape, a wooden structure barely visible through the storm. The ranger station, old and weather-beaten, but standing. They pushed toward it with the last of their strength. Jack kicked the swollen door until it gave way. Inside, the station was dusty and abandoned, but intact enough to shield them. He set Dylan gently on a wooden cot, then helped Sarah collapse onto another. Rex shook the rain from his coat and paced the room, ears rotating like small radars. Jack immediately searched the supply shelves. Most items were long expired, but he found a small first aid kit, a metal fire bin, and a few pieces of old but usable firewood. A forgotten battery pack sat on the desk. Weak, but better than nothing. He sparked a fire, feeding it with old papers and wood until warmth slowly spread through the station. Sarah's color began to return slightly, and Dylan stopped trembling as violently. Jack then approached the radio mounted on the wall. It looked ancient, half covered in dust, but the wiring seemed intact. He connected the weak battery pack, watching the dim power light flicker to life. Static filled the room, barely audible over the storm. Rex sat beside him, ears perked. Jack tried the dial once, twice, a third time. A faint crackle responded, but no voice. The battery was dying quickly. Jack inhaled deeply, jaw tight. "Come on," he urged the radio, as if willing it alive. "Just a little more." Behind him, Sarah whispered, voice still weak but full of hope. "If anyone's listening, they'll hear you." The storm raged outside, but inside the ranger station, warmth, determination, and fragile hope began to grow. The storm had eased by dawn, but the ranger station still creaked from the night's violence. A pale, washed-out light filtered through the dirty windows as Jack hovered over the old radio, its power lamp flickering weakly like a heartbeat on the verge of stopping. The battery pack he had found, a dented, half-corroded metal box, was barely holding on. Static filled the room in uneven pulses. Jack adjusted the dial again, his brow creased in focus, the cut on his shoulder throbbing from the rock strike the night before. His hands, strong, steady, calloused from years in the Marines, worked the controls with practiced patience. Sarah, wrapped tightly in blankets near the growing fire, watched him with quiet determination. She looked slightly better in the morning light. Her pale skin had regained a faint warmth, and her golden-brown hair, though tangled, framed her face more gently. She struggled to sit upright, resting her back against the wooden wall. The exhaustion remained, but so did her will. Her voice was still soft and raspy from the cold. "Jack, do you think they'll hear us?" Jack didn't turn from the radio. "They have to." Dylan slept on the cot beside her, his freckled face relaxed at last, his splinted arm resting across his chest. The boy's sandy hair fell messily over his forehead. The night had been brutal for him. Shivers, pain, half-conscious murmurs. But Rex had hardly left his side, resting close enough for the boy to bury his fingers in the dog's thick black and tan fur whenever fear seized him. Now Rex stood near Jack, poised, ears lifted, tail low but alert. Jack twisted the frequency knob again. A faint burst of static crackled, then died. He exhaled sharply. The battery was nearly gone. He pressed the transmit button anyway. "This is Jack Turner. Emergency crash survivors at the old North Ridge Ranger Station. 2 injured. Repeat. 2 injured. We need assistance. Coordinates." He gave them precisely, voice strong, unwavering. For several seconds, only the sound of static responded. Then, just barely, a distant squawk. A noise that could have been interference or a response. Jack leaned closer. "Come on, come on." The power indicator dimmed to a dull red. The battery was almost finished. Suddenly, Rex barked, sharp, insistent, not out of fear but recognition. He rushed toward the door, nose pressed against the gap beneath it, tail rising. Jack stiffened. "What is it, boy?" he murmured. Rex barked again, louder this time, pacing in a tight circle. His ears pointed north, where the forest rose into higher ridges. Sarah's eyes widened. "He hears something." Jack moved to the window, squinting through the fog. Nothing yet, but Rex's instincts never lied. The dog barked again, 3 rapid bursts. then one long call. Jack had trained him to signal incoming presence this way. "Someone's out there," Jack said. "Rescue team must be close." But close wasn't enough. The forest was huge, fog thick, visibility terrible. They needed a signal stronger than the failing radio. Jack looked at the fire burning in the metal bin. An idea sparked. Pine resin. The ranger station shelves still held old maintenance supplies. Fire starter bricks, dried resin chunks, and brittle pine knots stored for emergencies decades ago. Jack gathered the resin and piled it into a metal drum just outside the cabin door. Resin burned hot, fast, and produced thick white smoke. Rex bounded around him as Jack packed the drum, the dog sensing urgency. Sarah watched him, her voice trembling. "Is it safe?" "It's our best chance," Jack said. He struck the lighter. The resin ignited instantly, flames roaring upward. Soon, a towering column of dense white smoke spiraled into the air, visible for miles even through the fog. Rex barked triumphantly, as if announcing their position to the world. Minutes passed. Then the faint thumping began. Distant, rhythmic, helicopter blades. Sarah covered her mouth with both hands, tears welling in her exhausted eyes. Dylan stirred awake, his voice soft. "They're coming?" Jack listened, steady, hopeful, but not celebrating yet. The thumping grew louder. A shape emerged through the fog, bright orange, the same rescue service color as Sarah's uniform. Jack stepped outside, waving both arms, Rex barking beside him with explosive joy. The helicopter descended, kicking up debris. Two rescuers jumped out, one tall and broad-shouldered with a salt and pepper beard, the other younger with sharp blue eyes. Both wore heavy rain gear and emergency packs strapped across their chests. They moved with speed and purpose. The bearded rescuer reached Jack first. "We picked up a broken signal, then saw the smoke. Hell of a job keeping them alive out here." Jack nodded, keeping things simple as always. Just did what was needed. Inside the ranger station, medics tended to Sarah and Dylan. Sarah squeezed Jack's hand before being lifted onto the stretcher. Her voice was weak but steady. "Jack, you saved us. All of us. You should come back. The world needs people like you doing what they're meant to do." Jack held her gaze for a moment, then glanced at Rex standing loyally at his side, tail thumping in the dirt. "I didn't do anything special," Jack said gently. "I just did the right thing." As the rescuers flew Sarah and Dylan away, Jack and Rex stood on the ridge, the last of the storm clouds drifting apart to reveal a pale morning sky. For the first time in a long time, Jack felt something he hadn't let himself feel in years. Peace. Sometimes, miracles don't arrive with thunder in the sky or angels we can see. Sometimes, they come in the quiet form of a man who refuses to walk away. A loyal dog who listens to the whisper of danger, a spark of courage when all hope seems lost. What happened out there in the wilderness wasn't just survival. It was a reminder that God works through ordinary people, through hands that lift, voices that comfort, and hearts that refuse to give up. When Jack stepped into that storm, when Rex barked into the wind, when Sarah held on just one more minute, those weren't accidents. Those were moments where grace touched the ground, moments where heaven leaned a little closer. And maybe that's the message for us today. In your hardest night, God can send help in ways you never expected. Through a stranger, a friend, or even the strength you didn't know you had. So as you go back to your own life, your own storms, remember, you are not alone. You are watched over. You are cared for in ways you may not always see. but always feel. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment telling us what part moved you the most. And if you believe in miracles, big or small, please subscribe to the channel so we can continue bringing stories of faith, kindness, and second chances to you. May God bless you, guide you, and protect you through every storm in your life. And may His grace shine over you and your family today and every day ahead.